I call upon the Premier Minister of Finance to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that leave be granted to introduce the following bill standing in my name, shortly entitled Police Amendment Bill 2024.
Second, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, it has been moved and seconded that leave to introduce the bill shortly entitled Police Amendment Bill 2024 be granted. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. I now call upon the Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I introduce the bill standing in my name, shortly entitled Police Amendment Bill 2024, and will explain its provision at the second reading. Madam Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Police Amendment Bill 2024 be now read a first time.
Second, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, it has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Police Amendment Bill 2024 be now read a first time. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill for the first time.
This bill shall be cited as the Police Amendment Bill 2024.
Thank you. I call upon the Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that Standing Order number 52-2 be suspended to allow for the bill shortly entitled Police Amendment Bill 2024 to be read a second time.
Second, Madam Speaker. I rise on a point of privilege to echo my very serious concerns with this proposed Police Act amendment going through the first, second, and third stages in one sitting. Madam Speaker, on perusal of the bill, there are some very serious incursions on the fundamental rights and freedoms of the citizens of this country. We have not been able, Madam Speaker, to make the public fully aware as to what is contained in this bill and the possible implications on their right to privacy as provided for in the Constitutional Order of 2007. In particular, Madam Speaker, as a representative for District 6, I have not been able to bring a bill of this magnitude that is so important to the people of District 6 so that they can understand the implications on their lives going forward in this bill. And so, Madam Speaker, I am raising my concerns that I do not think it is the right thing. There needs to be wider public consultation on this bill before it is made law. It is too serious a piece of legislation for us to 1, 2, 3 with the public not knowing all that is involved, Madam Speaker. I couldn't sit here because it will be a travesty. It will be a travesty, an absolute travesty, if we were to do this in this Honourable House, Madam Speaker.
Member for the second.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker,
I want to also support the sentiments raised by the member for the 6th District regarding this bill and trying to get it through first, second, and third reading. Madam Speaker, this is a new session of the House of Assembly. This Police Act has come and tried to come to this House in many different forms, shapes, and sizes. And the way it is now being presented, Madam Speaker, is coming on a different disguise, so to speak, that would...
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Point.
Madam Speaker, I think that the member for 6, based on what he said, should move a motion to have the bill removed from the order paper
and have the second reading postponed. And then members could debate it at this point before we continue, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I just want to finish what I was saying. In that we have to be careful in what we're doing. We understand the nature of what we're dealing with in our territory. It is how we're doing it, Madam Speaker. And we have to be responsible in how we are presenting something like this to the public, because it not just affects the police acting their ability to do their job, it affects the general public and the people that we are responsible for and our families, Madam Speaker. So I support the member for the 6.
Thank you. I think what the Deputy Premier mentioned may be the appropriate course. As Premier, you wish to say something?
Madam Speaker, point of order. I moved a motion. I didn't even have an opportunity for my motion to be seconded, which is my right if I move a motion. After that motion is seconded, if persons want to debate that motion, I mean, I have to remind myself if this is a motion that would be debated, I would assume so. Persons debated, but I did not even have the opportunity to have my motion seconded, which is not in keeping with parliamentary practice. So, Madam Speaker, before my whole motion is derailed, I think at least my motion should be given an opportunity to be seconded. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yes, well, I think just for us to clarify things, Premier, I don't think your motion would be derailed. The reality is the member rose on a point of privilege. So it hasn't, in fact, challenged what you have brought forward as a motion.
Madam Speaker, I certainly accept that. But what ensued on that point of privilege, Madam Speaker, was a debate as to whether this thing should be given a second reading. So I have no challenge with a point of privilege, but in essence what it was, it started to, and then the other member got up, and they started to debate as to whether this bill should be given a second reading before the motion was even allowed to be able to be seconded. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Noted. Is there a second to your motion? The honorable members, it has been moved and seconded as number 52 to be suspended to allow the bill entitled Police Amendment Bill 2024 to be read a second time. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against?
No.
Madam Speaker, may we have a division of votes on this, please?
Yes.
Honourable Dr. Carl Dawson.
Yea.
Honourable Shari B. De Castro. Honourable Julian Fraser. Honourable Stacey Mehta. Honourable Marlon A. Penn.
No.
Honourable Kai Reimer. Honourable Ronnie Skelton. Honourable Lorna Smith. Abstain. Honourable Luce Hodge Smith.
Yay.
Honourable Melvin Turnbull.
You heard?
No.
Honourable Myron Walwyn.
No.
Honourable Dr. Natalio Wheatley.
Yes.
Honourable Vincent Wheatley.
The results are as follows: 7 ayes, 5 noes, 1 abstained. Majority rule. The motion has passed. I call upon the Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Police Amendment Bill 2024 be read a second time. And I'll now give the objects and reasons, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in February 2024, the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force released its 4th round mutual evaluation report concerning our jurisdiction, alongside several other nations. This comprehensive assessment has revealed both commendable achievements within our anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism framework, and significant deficiencies that we must urgently rectify to protect the reputation of the Virgin Islands and strengthen our financial system. Firstly, I commend the positive outcomes of the report. The Virgin Islands has attained compliance with 11 out of 40 recommendations, is largely compliant with 25, partially compliant with 3, and regrettably non-compliant with 1 recommendation. While these ratings are an indication of our commitment and diligence to satisfying our obligations, they also point out the need for further enhancement of our legal framework. We must continue to demonstrate meaningful and tangible progress in addressing the recommended actions to mitigate the risk of being grey-listed for a protracted length of time. In light of these findings, it is essential that we advance appropriate amendments to the Police Act to rectify the deficiencies identified in Recommendation 31, as well as immediate outcomes 7 and 8. The proposed amendments in this bill are aimed at empowering our law enforcement agencies and ensuring our adherence to international standards. Recommendation 31. It is paramount that our competent authorities are equipped with the requisite powers and investigative techniques to respond effectively to mutual legal assistance requests and combat money laundering activities. While there are existing provisions that address some of these areas, there's need for improvement. We must enhance the production, search, and seizure capabilities of our law enforcement, not just for international cooperation, but also for the progression of domestic cases. Moreover, immediate outcomes 7 and 8, as discussed in the mutual evaluation report, highlights a number of deficiencies in our legal framework concerning money laundering investigations and the confiscation of criminal proceeds. The MER discloses that our policing framework lacks the advanced investigative techniques necessary for confronting complex investigations, such as controlled deliveries and undercover operations. The recommended actions set out in the MER are not merely bureaucratic suggestions. They provide essential tools that our law enforcement agencies require to effectively combat serious criminal activities. By equipping our law enforcement with the necessary powers and tools to thoroughly investigate and prosecute money laundering offenses, we are not just fulfilling our international obligations, but creating an environment that allows for the proper detection and punishment of criminal activities. These proposed legislative amendments will not only facilitate the return of stolen assets to victims, but also deprive criminals of their ill-gotten gains, thereby making our society safer and more just. Additionally, the bill introduces Section 35B and 35C, aimed at bolstering the effectiveness of our law enforcement authorities in combating serious crimes, particularly financial offenses. These amendments are vital to reinforcing our legal framework, enhancing cooperation among domestic and international agencies, and aligning our strategic initiatives with international standards and global best practices. For these reasons, the passage of this bill, along with necessary amendments, is of utmost importance. We must act resolutely to increase our compliance ratings, address the deficiencies identified in the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force report, and maintain the Virgin Islands' reputation as a secure and stable financial center. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, we have a significant opportunity here to strengthen our legislative framework and to reaffirm our commitment to protecting these Virgin Islands. Let's take this opportunity and engage with this piece of legislation to enhance its effectiveness. Madam Speaker, in addition to my prepared statement, let me just say a few words about the challenge we are seeking to confront here in this Virgin Islands. The first thing I'll say, Madam Speaker, is this bill was first introduced in the last session of the House. I think that we had to pass that somewhere around middle of December when we passed the budget. We gave this Police Amendment Bill 2024 its first reading. It was gazetted and made public. I believe that had to be somewhere around 3 weeks ago, Madam Speaker. And the public would have had an opportunity to look at the bill. And each representative would have had the opportunity to sensitize their constituents to the bill. Could have found a little time between the merriment and Carolyn and whatever else it was. We had several walking days since this bill was passed. We had several walking days. And it's important. If it's something that we thought was important enough, we had time. Having said that, Madam Speaker, it is a serious bill. I would not attend this new session for first, second, and third reading unless it was of the utmost urgency. It is not an issue to politicize, Madam Speaker. And for those who want to politicize it, I think it's unfortunate. Madam Speaker, we all grew up in the Virgin Islands, which was peaceful. We speak about it all the time. You could go several years without even having one murder, Madam Speaker. The Virgin Islands was one of the most peaceful places on the planet. And Madam Speaker, we are still relatively low crime jurisdiction. We are still able to walk the streets and enjoy a relative level of security. But the Virgin Islands of today, Madam Speaker, is not the Virgin Islands of our past. Those days when you can just leave your vehicle open, sleep with your doors unlocked and open, we can no longer do such things. Madam Speaker, we've had occurrences as it pertains to crime which should move all of us to tears. Should move all of us to tears. Madam Speaker, I will remind the public and the members of the House of a young girl named Trinity down in West End, lost her life in a hail of gunfire. She could have been my daughter. In fact, we all should behave as though that was our daughter. That was somebody's daughter. That was somebody's sister. That was somebody's niece. And the fact that that young child barely know what it means to be alive, lost her life in a hail of gunfire, should move all of us. It should convict our conscience. Madam Speaker, we had Mrs. Pickering in Paraquita Bay, constituent of mine. Again, lost her life to violent crime. Criminals went to her place of residence, the place where she should feel most secure. And that would be the last breath that she ever breathed. Madam Speaker, Mrs. Pickering could have been my mother. That's somebody's mother. That's my friend's mother. That's my friend's wife. That was somebody's sister, somebody's aunt. That murder, callous murder, should convict us. It should prick our conscience. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we've had prominent members of our society, public officers who've served the people of the Virgin Islands well. They've had persons come into their homes and force them to lie on the ground. Madam Speaker, my main responsibility as leader of this government is to protect the people of the Virgin Islands. My main responsibility. Madam Speaker, this is not the Virgin Islands of the past. And if we miss this mark and we don't meet this moment, the eyes of history will look at us and say, what did you do when you had an opportunity to make an intervention to protect these Virgin Islands? Do we wait for another Trinity? Do we wait for another Mrs. Pickering before we are moved, before we are convicted enough to ensure that we have the tools necessary to arrest this corrupted practice of crime? Madam Speaker, I want to appeal to those persons who are out there who are involved in criminal activities. I want to appeal to you. Put down the guns. Turn in your weapons. I want to appeal, if you are involved in illicit activity, turn your life around. It is not too late. Get on the right side. Right now you're on the wrong side. Right now you are living a life that's a fast life and it ends quickly. You live fast and you die fast. There are too many young persons sitting in Greenland Cemetery or Johnson Gut Cemetery or right there, Longbush. Too many individuals are sitting up in Balsam Gut. Madam Speaker, I don't want to say too much, but I sit in the National Security Council. And I know the threat that we face as a territory. Let's not take it for granted. If we do not act now, things will get much worse. We must act. Madam Speaker, I get reports of teenagers, 14 and 15-year-olds, who are now armed. They're barely going through puberty. And they have weapons of destruction. We watch the television. We know that what can happen. Just the other day in the United States, they have persons shooting up a school. The other day, we had a shooting close by school premises. While school was going on. Let me say, Madam Speaker, I have 2 children that go to that school. I heard the reports of the persons who attend that school who are in some real serious trouble with the police. Madam Speaker, I say to you again, if we do not act now, the eyes of history will look at us disappointingly. Disappointingly. Madam Speaker, we cannot allow the Virgin Islands to be a safe haven for criminals. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I appeal to those persons who are involved in crime to turn away from that wicked, selfish behavior. Because if you do not turn away from crime, if you do not seek to live in a legal way, I will use every power that I have in my ability to ensure that you are prosecuted and imprisoned for your crimes. Now, Madam Speaker, we have a system of justice. We have a system of justice Madam Speaker, justice is not perfect. Madam Speaker, crime is an evolving phenomenon. Madam Speaker, the police force and our laws have to keep pace with the modern reality of crime. Have to keep pace. This police act that we have is something, Madam Speaker, that we have to confront as a people. I understand why we don't want to amend the Police Act. I'm going to get to the reason why we don't want to amend it. I'm not just talking about this house, past house. When the Police Act pops up, somehow or the other, it die a slow death. I'm going to tell you why we don't want to amend the Police Act and why we are leaving our police force ill-equipped to be able to properly fight crime in a modern way. It's something that we have to confront as a people. Madam Speaker, the governor, under Section 60, is responsible for internal and external security. The governor is over the police force. And Madam Speaker, because of the cultural differences that we as Virgin Islanders have with the United Kingdom, we are inherently fearful. We are inherently fearful that we will have to be fearful of the police and what they can do to the majority of persons. And those fears are easily stoked. And therefore, when the Police Act comes up, we start thinking about the police going into regular citizens' homes, and we start thinking all types of things, Madam Speaker, about what the police can do to us. And we don't think enough about that threat that confronts all of us that we need to be protected from. And Madam Speaker, what I would say to those fears are that those fears are not unfounded. You look in the United States, the same thing happens. When you have the black community there who are fearful and distrustful of the police, because the police have been used against the black community in the United States, the same thing happens in the United Kingdom. What I would say to those persons who have those fears is we have to confront those fears. Let us do what we need to do, and let's modernize our Constitution and ensure that these institutions are controlled by our people. That is what we do. But until we gain the courage to do that, Madam Speaker, we cannot leave our people defenseless. And Madam Speaker, let me just say this. Whenever you speak about crime, you have to ensure that you, and enhancing the powers of the police, you have to have a balance. Madam Speaker, I accept. And in fact, I'm an advocate for that balance. Madam Speaker, whenever you speak about enhancing the powers of the police, you have to have a balance. Because yes, when you give power, power can be subject and prone to abuse. That is the truth, Madam Speaker. And that is why you need a society with appropriate checks and balances. That's why you have an executive, that's why you have a legislative branch and a judiciary. All of them are checks on the other branch. And we as legislators, we have a responsibility to ensure those checks and balances exist. But Madam Speaker, we have to say it for the public who may not have read or been exposed to what we've been exposed to. In 2007, Madam Speaker, we got a constitution. And one of the victories of that constitution was a quote-unquote Bill of Rights. That constitution gave us a Bill of Rights. Madam Speaker, much of the protections that we know need to be in place to protect our residents and citizens from abuses are enshrined within that Bill of Rights. The fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual. Madam Speaker, the Constitution is the highest law of the land. And this law, or any other law, cannot overturn the Constitution. The laws have to walk in conformity with the Constitution, but they certainly cannot contradict the Constitution. And the Constitution will even go as far, Madam Speaker, to say that no other law can contravene this section. Madam Speaker, that was done because it was recognized that there are certain protections which would not be subject to the whims of one legislature or the other. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm going to read some of those protections for you. It's in Section 16, Madam Speaker, of the Constitution. It is titled Provisions to Secure Protection of Law. Madam Speaker, these are rights that cannot be taken away from the individuals in our society. I'll just read a few of them. I won't read all, it's a long section. Madam Speaker, it says, 16.1 says, if any person is charged with a criminal offense, then unless the charge is withdrawn, he shall be afforded a fair hearing within a reasonable time by an independent and impartial court established by law. Subsection 2. Every person who is charged with a criminal offense A, be presumed to be innocent until he or she is proved guilty according to law. B, be informed promptly as prescribed by law in a language that he or she understands and in detail of the nature of the offense charged. C, be given adequate time and opportunity for the preparation of his or her defense. D, be permitted to defend himself or herself before the court in person or at his or her own expense by a legal practitioner of his or her own choice, or where he or she is unable to afford to retain a legal practitioner and the interests of justice so require, by a legal practitioner at the public expense, provided through an established public legal aid scheme as prescribed by law. E, be entitled to examine in person or by his or her legal practitioner the witnesses called by the prosecution before the court, and to obtain the attendance and carry out the examination of witnesses to testify on his or her behalf before the court on the same conditions as those applying to witnesses called by the prosecution. F, be permitted to have without payment the assistance of an interpreter if he or she cannot understand or speak the language used at the trial of the charge. G, when charged on indictment in the High Court, have the right to jury by trial, to trial by jury. And Madam Speaker, we have just about 12 subsections there. And the protections of the individuals are enshrined as it pertains to law, enshrined in that provision. Madam Speaker, you also have other protections in this Constitution. You have protection to your right to privacy. You have protections. Madam Speaker, let me go to the right to privacy. Madam Speaker, I should have asked for your permission to read it. Hopefully that is. I'll continue, Madam Speaker. Yes, Madam Speaker. You have the right to personal liberty, equality before the law, and you have a right to private and family life and privacy of home and other property. The right to privacy is here enshrined in the Constitution. Every person has a right to respect for his or her private and family life, his or her home and his or her correspondence, including business and professional communications. Except with his or her own consent, no person shall be subjected to the search of his or her person or property, or the entry by others on his or her premises. And this is what we have to pay attention to. Nothing in any law, or done under its authority shall be held to contravene this section to the extent that it is reasonably justifiable in a democratic society. A, in the interests of defense, public safety. Let me repeat that again. Defense, public safety, public order, public morality, public health, town and country planning, the development of mineral resources, or the development or utilization of any other property in such manner as to promote the public benefit, for the purpose of protecting the rights and freedoms of other persons, to enable an officer or agent of the government of the Virgin Islands, a local government authority or body corporate established by law for public purposes to enter on the premises of any person in order to inspect those premises or anything on them for the purpose of any tax, rate, or due, or in order to carry out work connected with any property that is lawfully on those premises and that belongs to the government of the Virgin Islands or that authority or body corporate, as the case may be. D, to authorize for the purpose of enforcing the judgment or order of a court in any proceedings, the search of any person or property by order of a court, or the entry upon any premises by such order, or for the prevention or detection of offenses against the criminal law or the customs law. I say that to say, Madam Speaker, the Constitution affords us protections, but the Constitution anticipates and outlines clearly that those protections have limitations. Those protections are not unlimited. And Madam Speaker, the nature of policing means that in some instances, for the purposes of public safety, that some of our freedoms must be curtailed. That's why in Trinidad and Tobago right now, they have a state of emergency. Because when crime gets to a particular point, when you call a state of emergency, even more of your rights are curtailed. And the police would have more powers in a state of emergency. Madam Speaker, we all have to be mature enough as a society to understand and realize that we have to give the police powers, and these are not powers which other police forces don't have in other parts of the world. This is the Virgin Islands Police Force entering into a modern reality. The legislation is vastly inadequate to confront the modern challenges that I have described. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We have to give the police the tools. The police, the Director of Public Prosecution, we have to give them the tools to be able to help the Virgin Islands be a safer place. If it's not safe, Madam Speaker, let's kiss tourism goodbye. Let's kiss financial services goodbye. Let's just accept the fact we're going to have a rodeo Wild West here in the Virgin Islands and all that comes along with it. Madam Speaker, we have to care more about the safety of the residents and citizens than we care about protecting criminals. Madam Speaker, let me say this. I know that persons need to be protected. I have been a victim of the abuse of the police, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I've had a gun pointed at my head. Madam Speaker, I've been jailed wrongfully. Madam Speaker, I know what it's like. I used to live in the United States. I had locks in my hair. I looked like Bob Marley's son. I used to drive what I thought at that time was a nice car. And when you look a particular way, you're targeted. Madam Speaker, one time there was a circle of police officers around me, pushing me around in a circle. Madam Speaker, I know what it means like for the police to abuse their authority. I know persons need protections. We are intelligent enough, we are smart enough as 13 legislators. The bill comes here in a particular form, yes. We have 13 smart people. There's no reason why the bill needs to leave the way it came. Yes, we cannot give power without checks and balances. If there needs to be additional oversight for the persons who have these powers, if we need to strengthen the provisions in the legislation to ensure that there's appropriate check so that you don't have a rogue commissioner, a rogue deputy commissioner, a rogue superintendent, a rogue inspector, a rogue constable, whoever it is, decide that they can abuse a member of the public. I don't want that, and I know no one here wants that. But we are intelligent enough to be able to do it. We are smart enough. We have people in here, including the speaker who is a lawyer. So, Madam Speaker, let's do the responsible thing. Consider these provisions carefully. Have whatever discussion we need to have in the committee stage. But let's be ever mindful of what it is we are seeking to achieve, which is a safer Virgin Islands. That is what we're seeking to achieve. We're seeking to achieve a Virgin Islands where none of us have to live in fear, where we don't have to be fearful of receiving a call, that terrible unwanted call, that something happened to someone we love. Let us do the responsible thing, Madam Speaker. If we need to make some amendments in committee, let us do this. But doing nothing is not an option. We have to do something, Madam Speaker, to curtail, to arrest, to prevent this scourge on our society called crime. Thank you, Madam Speaker.